Hey everybody, this is Dennis Domzalski. I am coming to you from my spacious and luxurious home office, which happens to double as my garage. Actually, it is my garage, and this is one of my favorite places. This is where I wrote most of my new book. It's called Disturbers Row, and this is my new YouTube channel. It's called Disturbers Row. It's going to be about this book and about a whole bunch of other stuff. I like this garage because I'd come out here, and I still do. I'm an author, publisher, writer for the past 40 years. Come out here, and mostly in the summer, fire up a cigar about 4 o'clock in the morning. It's still dark out. Dark sort of squeezes in on you, and just start daydreaming and banging away at the computer and writing. And it's a wonderful, wonderful process, and I really enjoy it. Anyway, so this is Disturbers Row. And again, this channel is going to be about this book, and I'll probably do some readings from it. Who knows? But I'm going to explain a lot of things, and also a couple of other things. I've got a couple of other books up on Amazon. This I Got Stinky Feet series, volumes 1 and 2. It's a cross-country motorcycle trip two goofballs take starting on the first day of winter from the frozen city of Chicago, and all them nuts, crazies, and goofballs that they meet. Anyway, so let's get into Disturbers Row. You can buy this on Amazon. The book is, I've said before, is about two things. It's about the freedom we had in the 1950s and 60s to grow up, to be kids, to roam at will, and also the crazed, abusive, nutty nuns that we had, and they were indeed nutty and abusive. And Disturbers Row is about five seventh grade boys whom this nun called Disturbers, and how we just cause chaos in our classroom and disturb it, and how we fight back against that, and how we fight back and rebel against that mindless and abusive authority, and we actually won. So here's the thing: you can read Disturbers Row. There's a lot in it. I've already gotten some goofballs who criticize, and I knew those people would be out there. And they're saying things like, that didn't happen. The sisters at our school were really nice. They never beat anybody. I never saw that. Well, those people are basically the good kids. They're the kids who were slaves to authority. They're the kids who wanted more rules to obey so that the nuns could give them little golden stars. Yeah, there are a lot of those people out there, and they're still out there. Nuns and the priests could do no wrong. So they don't, and they refuse to acknowledge or believe that some of these people, nuns and the priests, were actually very abusive. So, but these good kids, yeah, no, sister wouldn't have done that. All they want is another rule to obey, because they love, well, they love obeying. That's what they live for. They don't think for themselves. They didn't think for themselves back then. They probably still can't think for themselves. Those are some of those people who hate the idea of freedom, and they love the idea of being told what to do. So anyway, I'm going to give you a few examples from the book Disturbers Row that actually happened. These are nuns beating people up. Children, they're beating up children. So these are true stories. They really happened, and they can't be denied, no matter how much the little suck-ups want to. Oh, sister, I obeyed another rule. So here's one story, and this happened in my classroom to a guy I know. His name was Michael. I'll use his real name, Michael Court. We were in first grade at Our Lady of Grace Grammar School in the city of Chicago, in the neighborhood of Logan Square. We were in first grade, so that means I was 6, he was 6 or 7. He lived several, 4 or 5 blocks away from the school. We all walked to school in the morning, and he got there late, but his mom had given him a note that he could give to the principal explaining why he was late, or as they would say, tardy. Well, he gave it to the principal, and she said, oh, it'll be okay. Just go up to your classroom, and I'll give you a little note so that your sister will understand. So anyway, Court went, got into our first grade room. He was late. He gave Sister Mary Thomas Edward the little note that he had gotten from the principal, and she basically just crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. I don't remember what she said, but here's what she did next. Court was still, it was a fall or early winter, and he had a jacket on. So it was a relatively new building, and the school building, and it had a blackboard that slid up on rollers on the sides. And behind that blackboard was two rows of coat hooks. In other words, the cloak room, as the nuns called them. And so Sister Mary Thomas Edward took Michael. Again, he's about 6 years old. She picks him up, and he's not that big. He's only, again, pretty young, and hangs him on the upper level of one of the coat hooks. Just hangs him by the coat. Now, remember, he's first grade, so he's still pretty short. His legs are kind of dangling. They're not touching the floor. And then she takes the blackboard and rolls it back down. So there's Michael hanging from a coat hook in this dark, tiny little space, by himself. And I can't remember. He's whimpering, crying, or whatever. Anyway, I don't know what we thought, other than that, boy, this is nutty. At some level, we had to think that was nutty. She eventually did let Michael out, but I'll never forget that. And I always remember that a nun, Sister Mary Thomas Edward, took a first grader rather, about 6 years old, and hung him on a coat hook in a dark room. She hung him there. That's what she did. She was a nun. That's a first grader. Think about that. Think if you could do that to a 6-year-old today. And if you did, what would happen to you? Here's another one. This was second grade. And there was a kid in the class. His name was Lawrence Yeager. He was a very quiet kid. Never really talked. Nobody really knew much about him because he kept to himself. I think he was not just shy, but I think he was still probably scared. It's a tough thing to go to school. I don't think you really get over leaving your house and your mom till maybe third grade or something. Anyway, he was sad one day, and for some reason he just started crying. He's 7, 8 years old, so he's going to cry, right? 7, we'll say 7. Anyway, Sister Mary Concepta was the nun, and she was a young nun, but oh God, was she bitter. She just a really mean, angry person. She appeared to look pretty good, so who knows? Maybe she was pissed that she became a nun. Who knows? So there was a little stage up in front of our room, of the second grade room, maybe about 1.5 feet tall. And Sister Mary Concepta had Lawrence. She called Lawrence up and said, "Mister, what are you crying about?" Of course, Lawrence didn't know. He just shrugged his shoulders and continued to cry. And she finally said something like, "Well, mister, if you're going to cry in my classroom, I'll give you something to cry about." So she made Lawrence sit in a chair, and she took one of those olive green metal waste paper baskets, about 2 feet tall, put it in front of him, and said, "Mister, if you're going to cry in my classroom, you're going to fill up this waste paper basket with your tears." This is a second grade kid. He's 7 years old. And he's sitting in front of the room. Excuse me. We're all looking at him. And he's facing us. And he's just sitting there trying to cry into this olive green waste paper basket. Crazy. I don't know how that affected Lawrence, emotionally, mentally. I can't. It's not a good thing. It just wasn't a good thing. So that's a true story, and that actually happened. And, some of the deniers out there, it didn't happen. Yes, it did. Michael was hung on a coat hook, by a nun. Lawrence was made to cry into a waste paper basket by a nun. We had a nun. Her name was Sister Mary Dennis. She taught first grade. She was famous for throwing erasers at kids. Again, first grade, 6 years old, throwing erasers at them, shooting rubber bands at kids, going up to them and putting clothespins, the clip kind clothespins, with the spring, putting them on their noses or on their ears, and sometimes on their lips and their tongues if they talked. The crazy thing about the school I went to, or these nuns, were that, kids weren't allowed to talk. Well, what do kids do? They talk. So she would do that, but again, that's a first grader. Yeah, you're talking. We'll put a clothespin on your ear, put one on your nose. We'll throw stuff at you. Yeah, obey. Another one. My brother. And not all of it was physical abuse. A lot of it was actual emotional abuse. My brother, who's several years older than me, for kindergarten. Kindergarten was a half day at that point in time. But anyway, on his first or second day of kindergarten, they had some sort of playground equipment in the room, a slide, a merry-go-round, and a few other things, so that when you had breaks, the kids could play on these things and slide down the slides and blah, blah, blah. The nun did have a rule, though, that she told the kids on the first day, that when the bell rings, she had a little timer with a bell, that when it rings, you've got to stop immediately playing and come and sit back down in your desks. Okay, that's clear enough. So my brother, Mike, he was on the slide one day, and again, this is his first week of kindergarten. He's just leaving the house. There's no preschool back in these days. There's nothing like that, And so he's away from the house, away from his mom, and the bell rings to stop the play session. But Mike is on the top of the slide, ready to go down. What does he do? He figures, what the heck? I'm at the top anyway. I'll just slide down. That was his first big mistake in life, I'll tell you. And it haunts him to this day. The crazy nun, the abusive nun, the maniac nun who can brook no challenge to their authority or no breakage of any rule, told him, basically punished him for taking 2 extra seconds, maybe 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, probably 3 seconds to slide down a slide. So what she did to punish him is, for the next 2 weeks, when they had their play sessions, my brother was made to sit at a desk by himself, and apparently to contemplate on his sins or whatever. So here's a kid, and at that point in time, there's probably about 50 kids in a classroom. So all his friends and his classmates are playing on these little, on the merry-go-round and on the slide and using some of the other stuff. And he's stuck sitting at this table/desk by himself because he took 3 extra seconds after a tiny little bell rang. Now that's crazy. He still actually remembers that. And, when you talk to him, you can tell there's still some bitterness in him. But that's like sick stuff. What's the kid supposed to do? Not slide down the slide? 3 seconds? A violation? And you're going to humiliate a kid in front of his classmates? I'm telling you, that's sick. Another one. Oh, here's one. Lay teachers. Many of the lay teachers we had, some of them were okay. Most of them were kind of goofy too. Most of them were pretty mean. Most of them had the name of Miss Laffey, Miss Sturgis, Miss this, Miss that, Miss these, and the other things. And I think we figured that they were all named Miss and not Mrs. because they were all so mean. Like, who would want to marry him? Miss Laffey, 6th grade. I was talking, me and a buddy of mine, Michael Dravalis, we were talking. And we had real short hair at the time. Mine was probably as short as it is now. Michael always had a crew cut. But we were talking, and Miss Laffey just couldn't abide it. You can't talk in her classroom. So she came up to us, managed to grab some of our hair on our heads. I don't know how, but she did. And then, boom, slammed our heads together several times. Slammed our heads together. Luckily, there's nothing in mine, so it didn't really affect me. I don't know what Mike Travalis thought of that. I didn't. I don't know what I thought of it. She slammed our heads together. Crazy, crazy stuff. Bill Collins, and I can't remember. Oh, this is probably, I'm going to say 7th or 8th grade. So he's getting up there in years, 12, 13 years old. We played in a parking lot. We had recess, what they called playground, in a parking lot that the school rented. And it was, empty at the time. And the 7th and 8th graders would go there and play during the lunch hour. After we would walk home, most of us would walk home for lunch, eat quickly, then come back to school where we'd be on the playground and we'd play with each other. At this lot, we were playing basketball and just a few other things, sometimes just lolling around. But the bell would ring for the playground or the recess to end, and we'd have to all get in a line to march back to the school, which was about half a block away. Well, the bell rang, and Billy Collins, as we called him, saw a basketball by itself by one of the fences that enclosed the parking lot. Well, those were the property of the school, Our Lady of Grace School. Bill, being a conscientious kid and a pretty good kid, he wasn't a wild maniac. He didn't really cause he didn't cause any real trouble. But he picked up this ball and then came back in the line. His intention was to bring it back to school so that it wouldn't be lost. Well, that was a mistake. Because Sister Mary Yvonne, a real evil person, a lot of people will call her a witch. She was nasty. She was physically and emotionally abusive, really bad. And I'll give you maybe some examples about that too. Anyway, Collins has his ball in his hand, and Sister Mary Yvonne, she's got her arms folded in that goofy ass habit, those lengthy black and white habits that they wore, thick linen that stunk like starch. She's got her hands in a little pouch in there, and you knew when that happened, you knew trouble was coming because she was going to get you. She was angry. She was hunting for victims. Anyway, so Yvonne comes up to Collins and says, what are you doing with that ball? Or worse, the effect, is that your ball, mister? And, is that your ball, mister? And Collins says, no, it's, because it belongs to the school. Well, that was the answer, I guess, that Yvonne wanted to hear. And so she just wails off and poof, slaps him across the face, slaps him with the other hand. Because he picked up a basketball that was the property of the school and was trying to safeguard it. So she wails off and beats him. There was my brother Mike had another incident. He was practicing for confirmation in the church that was part of the parish. And we all got confirmed in 4th grade where we became soldiers of Christ. But he was sitting in a pew with his friend. I forget his friend's name. But they were just laughing. 4th grade, what are you going to do? Kids just laugh, right? And they joke around, they goof off. I mean, it doesn't matter if they're in church. They're kids. So they were singing a little jingle that had been going around at the time. Whistle while you work. Hitler is a jerk. Mussolini bit his weenie. Now it doesn't squirt. And one of them sung it to the other, or they both sang it to each other, and they just busted out laughing. Ha, 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 this is funny. Wow, his weenie doesn't squirt. I mean, this is racy stuff. And they said it in church. God, in front of giant crucifixes with Jesus nailed to them and blood spouting everywhere. Anyway, so I think this was Sister Mary Dennis again. Came up and saw him laughing and And if you laughed anytime, or especially in church, I mean, you were through, you were history. So Sister Mary Dennis came up to him. What are you laughing about? My brother said, "Oh, not much. Buzz told me a joke, and I told him a joke, and we thought it was kind of funny. We're singing a song or something like that." What was the joke? What was the song you were singing? Well, he didn't want to repeat it, that to a nun, because if she heard that, she truly would clobber him. By the way, to back up, she had basically yanked him out of the pew and stood him in the aisle, the main aisle of the church. So he's standing there, and she's questioning him, interrogating him, if you will. So he just shrugs his shoulders and, I don't know. So she grabs him by his hair and like wheels him around. That was a favorite stunt of theirs, to grab kids by the hair. Just, oh, and that hurts. You know, your scalp, look, it's sensitive, it hurts. So my brother instantly, when she grabbed him by the hair and started yanking his hair and hurting his scalp, he instinctively raises his hand, because that's what you do. That was another mistake. "Don't you raise your hand to me, mister." Boom! She slapped him. Slapped him again. What were you singing to each other? What was the joke? Sister, I really don't know. I mean, you know, I can't even remember. Boom! Boom! Then she yanks them by the ears. And that was another favorite thing of the nuns, yanking kids by the ears. It was, once again, it's a way to control people, and you can actually lead someone that way. But it's also a humiliating thing, especially if you do it in front of your classmates. You know, your classmates see you being treated that way, and that's a humiliation. Anyway, so he finally broke down and mumbled something like, "Hitler, I didn't hear you say that loudly and more clearly." And he finally did it. He finally had a hit, "Whistle while you work. Hitler is a jerk. Mussolini bit his weenie. Now it doesn't squirt." Ha, ha, ha. Kaboom! Kaboom! Now, again, understand where we are. We're in church. They're practicing for confirmation. The nun is beating up a fourth grader, slapping him, yanking his ears, yanking his scalp, in church, in God's house. Yeah. So that's those are some of the things they did. I think I've got a couple more here if I can remember. But girls had it bad too, and it wasn't just the boys that the nuns tormented and abused and beat. They really didn't like the girls, especially when they started getting fourth and fifth grades, and the girls started becoming aware of boys, and boys becoming aware of girls as well. So the girls would sometimes put on makeup. Put on makeup. And sometimes they'd put hairspray on. Well, those were always mistakes. And if girls came in with makeup, and if the nuns noticed it, we'd have a couple of times we'd have a recess out in the hall, meaning you'd have a morning break and an afternoon break. And during that time, the boys would stand on one line and the girls would stand on the other line. And we'd go to the lavatories or the bathrooms, and that was your chance to take a piss and do whatever you had to do to relieve yourself, you know. But if the girls had makeup, there was one Louise who one day had hairspray, and Yvonne hunting her with her arms like that in their little goofy pouch, just hunting, looking up and down the girl, spies. Louise, is that hairspray? And, you know, she feels it, yanks her hair, and, yeah, you're wearing hairspray. You're wearing hairspray. And these nuns were really, you know, and again, they're nasty. So they're insinuating that anybody who wore hairspray, any girl who wore hairspray or wore makeup, was basically a floozy. Or I don't think they ever used the word whore, but they insinuated it that you're. Now think of it: a fifth grade girl in the mid 1960s. We'll say 1964. Do you really in a working class neighborhood in the city of Chicago, blue collar, Polish, German, Irish, Italian? You really think they're going to be going out selling their bodies? Well, the answer is no. So anyway, Louise one day wore hairspray, and Yvonne took her into the girls' bathroom, held her head under the small sink, and just scrubbed it out with a bar of soap. And then, because she had makeup too, rubbed her face raw with a washcloth and soap. I mean, and these people weren't gentle about this stuff. They were really nasty. And so, Louise comes back to line. Her hair is soaking wet. Her face is red because it's been scrubbed raw by this crazed nun, with a washcloth. So those are some of the things that. Oh, I'll tell you one more. And this was me, and I think it was eighth grade, but it's in the book. So we were in one class one day, and we had a substitute teacher. Her name was Mrs. Corbett, and she was nuts. She was always, to us, we always thought she was popping pills or something. I mean, because she had pills, who knows what they were, but she had like a massive thermos of coffee, and she was just drinking this stuff all day. And she was skinny. She was probably about 5'8". Now she was probably, I'm going to say 5'10". She was pretty tall, dark hair, real thin, not emaciated, but really thin. And she was constantly edgy. She was nervous, if you will, and hyper. She was always talking loud, always talking fast, and we probably because of the coffee or the pills or whatever she was taking. Anyway, so we're in this class one afternoon, and my buddy Dave Nadolsky, fellow disturber, takes out a Swingline Top 50 stapler and shoots a staple at me. And of course, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to retaliate, right? So I get out my stapler, and I basically start shooting staples at Dave. Well, Miss Corbett sees this. She sees me shooting the staples at Dave, and she screams, "You're gonna blind him! You're gonna put his eye out!" She's screaming this in the room, which is right next door to my homeroom, which is a massive, beefy teacher named Sister Frances DeSales, who was also a mean person. "Go stand out in the hallway, mister," she orders me. Okay, I do that. I stand out in the hallway, and sure enough, a couple of moments later, not too long, Sister Mary Frances DeSales comes lumbering. And that time she was in her 50s, possibly early 60s, very heavy, 250, maybe 300 pounds, sort of she kind of limped. And so she lumbered, I will say, from side to side, but she was powerful. And she sees me standing outside of the classroom in the hallway. And she says, "Mister, what's going on?" And I said, "Well, Dave Nadolsky shot a staple at me, so I shot one back at him, and Mrs. Corbett saw it, and she yelled at me, and that's why I'm out here." So she opens the door to the classroom. But, "Mr. Nadolsky, get out here." So Dave comes out, and DeSales asks him, "Did you start this? Did you shoot the stapler first at Mr. Domzalski?" "Oh, no, sister. I didn't. No." Well, and I'll tell you why she believes him. I'll tell you why right at the end of this. So she believes him. She says, "Get back to your seat." He closes the door, walks back to his seat. And then, again, a couple of moments later, what's her name, DeSale, starts wailing on me. She usually wailed with the inner sides of her forearms, and we called them hams. I mean, they really were like ham. Poof, poof, hit me on the back. I've got probably my hands like this. She's poof, beat me across at the side of the head, the back. She actually takes me and throws me up against a wall. Now, this is a school building that was built in 1910. The walls are just solid plaster. They're not this plasterboard or this sheetrock that they build out of today. This is plaster. This is like a rock. Boom! And she's slamming me. And I don't know how long the beating goes on, except for quite a long time. Maybe 30 seconds, which would be a pretty long time. All I know is that, I mean, these are heavy blows, and they're landing, and I'm in the 8th grade. That means I'm 12 and 13 years old. So I'm doing my best to cover up. After she finishes wailing on me, she tells me, "Now get back into your seat and don't ever let me get you doing this again," blah, blah, blah. Well, I wobble back in, and the kids are like staring at me. And I think many of them mouths like this, because from what I learned later is that the noise of this beating just reverberated throughout the halls. And her slamming me into the wall, like there were vibrations. And apparently a lot of those kids couldn't believe that I was still standing. I was wobbling, and I tried my best to get back to my seat and, put on a bold front, like, "Oh, that didn't hurt me, and you know what? She can do that to me 5 times a day, and I'll still be standing." So, but it was, I consider it, and I've described it in the book, as the greatest beating ever in the history of Our Lady of Grace. That's the way Dave described it to me. So after class, we were walking home, and he told me why DeSales believed me. First, he told me, "Man, she really beat you. We heard it all the way in class. The walls were shaking, the floor was shaking, the blah, blah, blah. You could hear the thud. She was beating you." And, when you're in the midst of something like that, all you're trying to do is cover up, so you really don't know the extent of it. And so that was kind of cool, because it truly was a massive beating. A 50, 60-year-old adult, 300 pounds, beating up on a 13-year-old child. Pretty sick. Anyway, so Dave tells me, well, why she believed him. And it turns out that he had a sister, older sister. Her name was Joyce. And she used to go, DeSales taught her. She had Sister DeSales for a homeroom teacher at one point in time. Anyway, there was a couple of times when, and Dave was younger, there was a couple of times when Joyce was sick. And when she was sick, it was Dave who would have to go to her room, meaning DeSales' room, to get Joyce's homework. And, he could be a nice guy. He wasn't always a disturber. He's often trying to be kind of nice. And DeSales really liked him. He had sort of blonde hair, could smile when he wanted to, and had somewhat of an angelic face. So he said, and he told me that story. And he said, she's always liked me. She thinks I'm a really nice kid. And he said, "You never had a chance." And then he said, "She almost killed you." So those are some of the stories of nuns beating up children. Yes, they happened. And if you, out there, if you listen to this, if you've got stories like that of nuns beating kids up and you want to share them, email me, f.brilliant@yahoo.com. The email is on my Facebook page. Just do that, or respond somehow to this, put a comment down on in the comment section here, and put a contact number. I'd love to chat with you, because a lot of people, as I said before, don't believe it or deny that this stuff happened. Most of them are, as I said, the good kids, the slaves, the slavish ones. Sister, can you make up another rule so that I can obey it? Can I have a gold star, sister? Yeah, I hate them. I hated them then and I hate them now. So leave comments. I hope you enjoy this. I'm going to be posting a decent amount of stuff on this channel. Also about my other books, the Stinky Feet series as well. I'll have a good time doing this. I hope maybe I'll perhaps probably always come to you from my luxurious home office in the garage here. Be happy out there. Have fun. Take care.